I know the joke.
In August of 1977, a family in Enfield, England started seeing and hearing strange things. Now, before diving into the details of this terror, let's have a quick look at the main characters of our story, the Hodgson family. In researching the Enfield Poltergeist true story, we learned that the real Peggy Hodgson was a single mother with 4 children. Margaret, 12 years old. Janet, 11 years old. Johnny, 10 years old. And Billy, 7 years old. The Conjuring 2 true story reveals that according to the mother, Peggy Hodgson, the haunting of her Enfield home began on the evening of August 30, 1977. It was on that night that her daughter Janet told her that her brother's beds were wobbling. The next evening, Mrs. Hodgson heard a loud noise from upstairs. She entered her children's bedroom and saw a chest of drawers moving. She tried to stop the heavy oak chest as it moved toward the door, concluding that an invisible force was trying to trap them in the room. The real Janet Hodgson recalled many years later in a Channel 4 Enfield Poltergeist documentary. It started in a back bedroom. The chest of drawers moved, and you could hear shuffling. Thinking that it was Janet and her siblings making the noise, she said that her mother told them to go to sleep. She continues, "We told her what was going on, and she came to see it for herself. She saw the chest of drawers moving. When she tried to push it back, she couldn't. Later the family began to hear knocking coming from all sorts of places in the house. The knocking would fade in and out as it ran down the wall, supposedly frightening the family so much that they all slept in the same room with the light on." Vic Nottingham, a neighbor, claims that when he went into the home to investigate at the family's request, he heard a knocking on the wall and on the ceiling, leaving him somewhat frightened. Janet remembers her mom thinking there were burglars or drifters hiding out in their home, and calling the police to investigate. The officer who arrived reported witnessing a chair rise up and move across the floor on its own. Perhaps the most credible claim of furniture moving in the Hodgson home at 284 Green Street involved a policewoman, WPC Carolyn Heaps, who signed an affidavit to the effect that she had witnessed an armchair levitate approximately half an inch and move close to 4 feet across the floor. In all, there were more than 30 witnesses to similar strange incidents in the home. In addition to furniture moving, they had supposedly witnessed objects flying around, cold breezes, physical assaults, pools of water appearing on the floor, graffiti, and perhaps most incredibly, matches spontaneously igniting. Reporters from the Daily Mirror, who were also called in to report on the Enfield haunting, experienced them for themselves too. Legos and marbles were reported flying around the room, hot to the touch when picked up. Clothing folded on tabletops would leap off of them and fly across the room. The sound of dogs barking would be heard in empty rooms, lights would flicker, coins would drop out of thin air, and furniture would spin or tip over without being touched. One day, the iron fireplace in an upstairs bedroom was ripped out of the wall. After that, paranormal investigators from all around the world showed up, claiming to be able to contact spirits and wanting to know more about the Enfield haunting. Most of them decided that the children had been faking their experiences, as one of them had admitted to doing so on one occasion. Did demonologists Ed and Lorraine Warren really investigate the Enfield Poltergeist case? Yes, but to a far lesser degree than portrayed in the movie, which is somewhat misleadingly billed as being based on the true case files of the Warrens.
So what do you want us to do?
We'd like you to fly to London for 3 days. There is a family in London that desperately needs our help.
Paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren briefly investigated the Enfield Poltergeist in the summer of 1978, and were just 2 of the many investigators to visit the Hodgsons' North London home on Green Street. Most articles about the Enfield Poltergeist case don't even mention the Warrens, leading one to conclude that their role in the case was significantly dramatized for The Conjuring 2. In fact, Guy Lyon Playfair, one of the original paranormal investigators on the Enfield Poltergeist case, came forward prior to the movie's release and said that the Warrens had showed up uninvited and only stayed for a day.
Nobody ever mentioned him. I mean, I don't think anybody in the family had ever heard of him until he turned up uninvited.
He also said that Ed Warren told him he could make him a lot of money off the case. Ed Warren touched on the case and its skeptics in Gerald Brittle's book The Demonologist, stating, "Inhuman spirit phenomena were in progress. Now, you couldn't record the dangerous, threatening atmosphere inside that little house. But you could film the levitations, teleportations, and dematerializations of people and objects that were happening there, not to mention the many hundreds of hours of tape recordings made of these spirit voices speaking out loud in the rooms." As the case became widely viewed as a hoax, some saw it as proof that the Warrens themselves were frauds. After the family contacted the press, photographs of the real Janet Hodgson levitating were taken by Daily Mirror photographer Graham Morris. Janet recalled, "The levitation was scary, because you didn't know where you were going to land." Photographs of the real Janet Hodgson levitating only show her a short distance above her bed. This, coupled with the way her body is positioned in the air, has led many people to believe that she simply jumped from her bed. Supporting the family's claims were two witnesses, a baker and a lollipop lady, who were passing by outside and claimed to have seen Janet hovering above her bed as they looked through an upstairs window. Janet recalls, "The lady saw me spinning around and banging against the window. I thought I might actually break the window and go through it." Was Janet Hodgson really possessed by a dead man named Bill Wilkins? While fact-checking The Conjuring 2, we discovered that this part of the movie was to some degree inspired by audio tapes of the real Janet Hodgson. In the recordings, she can be heard conveying a message via an eerie voice, which is supposedly that of Bill Wilkins, a man who had died in the living room of the house several years earlier. The voice said, "Just before I died, I went blind. And then I had a hemorrhage and I fell asleep and I died in the chair in the corner downstairs." An interview with Janet Hodgson at the time suggests that the idea of talking in a possessed voice may have been encouraged and planted in Janet's mind by paranormal investigator Maurice Grosse. When asked when the voices started, Janet said that one night Maurice Grosse told them, "All we need now is the voices to talk." Almost immediately following this suggestion, they did. The voices had mainly growled, barked and made similar noises prior to this.
No, Doctor, Goose Chase is here.
The real Janet Hodgson told the UK's Channel 4 years later, "I felt used by a force that nobody understands. I really don't like to think about it too much. I'm not sure the poltergeist was truly evil. It was almost as if it wanted to be part of our family. It didn't want to hurt us. It had died there and wanted to be at rest. The only way it could communicate was through me and my sister." In exploring the Enfield haunting, we learned that Bill Wilkins' son Terry confirmed that he had died in a manner similar to what Janet described when she was possessed. Wilkins had passed away in an armchair downstairs after suffering a brain hemorrhage. According to the real Janet Hodgson, she says that she and her sister Margaret played with a Ouija board just prior to the start of the supernatural activity, which might be the cause of the whole thing. According to Janet, due to the mentioned events, Janet and her siblings were bullied at school. The other kids called her Ghost Girl and put crane flies down her back. Her brother was also tormented in similar ways. Did dozens of crosses turn upside down? Not really. In fact, checking The Conjuring 2 by comparing it to the real Enfield Poltergeist case, we found no evidence that crosses turned upside down on the walls of the Hodgson home. In fact, the upside-down cross has not traditionally been a symbol of evil. It is the cross of St. Peter, who was crucified upside down because he felt that he was not worthy to be crucified in the same way as Jesus. Now, what caused the Enfield Poltergeist events to quiet down? The real Janet Hodgson believes that it was a priest's 1978 visit to the family's Enfield home in North London that caused the haunting to calm down, not the Warrens. Though the occurrences did not end completely. Peggy still heard noises in the house from time to time. And Janet's younger brother Billy, who lived there until his mother passed, remarked that you always felt like you were being watched. What happened to the Hodgson family after the paranormal activity subsided? When the Enfield Poltergeist events subsided and the press attention faded, the family faced various challenges. Janet married young after leaving home at age 16. Her younger brother Johnny died of cancer at age 14. The family's claims of something paranormal being present in the house lasted all the way up until Peggy's death, at which time Janet's brother Billy moved out of the home. Janet, who will be 46 at the time of The Conjuring 2's release in 2016, lost a child herself, a son who died in his sleep at 18. She says that she didn't want to resurrect the painful memories of the Enfield Poltergeist events when her mother was alive, but that she is now ready to tell her story. After the real Peggy Hodgson passed away, Claire Bennett and her 4 sons moved into the Enfield home. Like Janet's younger brother Billy, Claire claimed that she always felt as if someone was watching her. During the night, her children would get woken up by voices coming from downstairs. She then learned about the Enfield poltergeist that had supposedly haunted the home. The final straw came when her son Shaka, 15, woke up and saw a man enter his room. They moved out the next day after being in the house for only 2 months. Some of you might ask, is it possible that the whole thing was a hoax? Yes. 2 experts from the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, caught the children bending spoons themselves. They also found it strange why no one was allowed in the room when Janet was talking in her possessed voice, which was supposedly that of Bill Wilkins, among others. Janet herself admitted that some of the Enfield haunting events were fabricated. In 1980, she told ITV News, "Yeah, once or twice, we faked things, just to see if Mr. Gross and Mr. Playfair would catch us. They always did." In an article that was published in the year before the release of The Conjuring 2, Janet said that roughly 2% of the paranormal activity in their Green Street home had been faked. During a Margaret and Janet Hodgson interview that aired as part of a TV special in 1980, Janet is asked how it feels to be haunted by a poltergeist. Janet replies smiling, "It's not haunted." Her sister smiles in astonishment, as if Janet just gave up a secret, and whispers, "Shut up," through muted giggles. Janet later said she didn't feel that the poltergeist was evil, meaning that the house wasn't necessarily haunted. Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If that's what happened, smash the like button, and subscribe to the channel for more true stories.